Welcome, dear soul. The day has come to a close. The worries can wait now. The questions can quiet. You have nothing to prove, nothing to carry. All that's asked of you is to rest. And while you rest, I will tell you a story. Not a loud story, not one of thunder or kings, but one full of quiet strength. The story of a woman named Ruth. Ruth wasn't a queen. She wasn't rich or powerful. She came from a land far from God's promises. She had no status, no grand family name, only a heart full of loyalty and a spirit full of kindness. And sometimes that's more than enough. The story begins with loss. There was famine, there was leaving, there was grief. But Ruth didn't walk away, she stayed, and in staying, she stepped quietly into the pages of God's great story. She didn't know it yet, but her life would become a thread in the tapestry of kings, in the family line of David, and generations later, in the family of Jesus. But before all of that, there was sorrow, there were long walks, there were fields of barley, and there was love, soft and steady, growing between two hearts who had both known pain. Tonight, we begin at the edge of that sorrow. But don't worry, this story is safe. It won't shake you awake. It will wrap around you like a lullaby. Because Ruth's story is one of hope returning, one of a future rebuilt, one gentle decision at a time. So close your eyes now. Let the hush of night fall over your mind like soft dew on a quiet field. Let the story unfold slowly, like the first light of morning over the hills of Bethlehem. You are safe here. You are welcome here. You are invited to listen, to rest, or to sleep. Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a quiet land called Moab, there lived a woman named Ruth. She was young then, strong and full of life. She had married a kind man. They made a home together, and life was good. But life, as it often does, began to change. It began with a famine, but not in Moab, in the land of Judah, far to the west. In that land, a man named Elimelech had taken his wife Naomi and their 2 sons to Moab to survive the hunger. There in Ruth's land, the 2 families met, and Ruth fell in love with one of Naomi's sons. She married him, and for a little while, everything was peaceful. 2 families, 1 roof, warm meals, shared stories. But sorrow, like a shadow, came quietly. First, Elimelech died. Then Naomi's 2 sons, Ruth's husband included, also passed away. 3 women left behind, no husbands, no children, no protection, no future. In those days, this kind of loss was not just painful, it was dangerous. There was no one to provide, no one to speak for them, no one to make a way. Naomi wept, not just for her husband, not just for her sons, but for Ruth too, and for Orpah, her other daughter-in-law. She told them with a soft and broken heart, "Go home, my daughters. Go back to your mothers. You are still young. You can marry again. You can build a new life. But I have nothing left. I must return to Judah." Orpah kissed Naomi's cheek, weeping, and she went home. But Ruth stayed. She reached for Naomi's hand. She held it tight. and she said words that would be remembered forever. Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Naomi looked into Ruth's eyes, and she saw it. Not pity, but loyalty. Not obligation, but love. So the two women, one old, one young, walked together, back to Bethlehem, back to a land Ruth had never seen, back to a people she didn't know, with nothing in their hands but hope. And even that was flickering. They arrived just as the barley harvest was beginning. The fields were full of golden grain. The air smelled of bread and earth. And somewhere in those fields, a man named Boaz was waiting. Though he didn't know it yet, she has come far from her homeland. Her heart is still tender. Naomi still grieves. The future is still unknown. But in the humblest place, a field of harvest, we begin to see how God's kindness reaches those who wait in stillness. So breathe deeply, settle in. Let this chapter be as soft as the breeze that moves through barley in the early morning light. You don't need to stay awake. Let the story carry you gently toward rest. The sun rose gently over Bethlehem. Its light spilled across the hills, soft and golden, kissing the rooftops and the fields below. And the barley swayed in the breeze, tall, warm, and ready to be gathered. The season of harvest had come. But for Ruth and Naomi, the cupboards were empty. They lived in a small house now, a borrowed space. The neighbors remembered Naomi from long ago, before the famine, before the sorrow. But now she returned with no husband, no sons, just a quiet daughter-in-law with foreign eyes and kind hands. And the people whispered, not cruelly, but curiously. And Naomi said only this, call me Mara, for the Lord has made my life bitter. But Ruth didn't complain. She rose early, wrapped a cloth around her head, and said softly, let me go to the fields, Naomi. Let me gather what's left behind. Perhaps I will find favor in someone's eyes. Naomi nodded. So Ruth set out, with nothing but her hands and her hope. It was the tradition in Israel that the poor and the stranger were allowed to follow behind the harvesters, to gather the pieces left behind. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ruth, the Moabite widow, found herself in one of those fields, quiet and wide, the sun warming her shoulders, her hands brushing golden stalks as she bent and gathered. She didn't know who the field belonged to, but God did. And on that very day, Boaz arrived. Boaz was a kind man, older than Ruth, a relative of Naomi's late husband. He had heard whispers about the foreign woman who had stayed with Naomi, about her faithfulness, her quiet spirit, her work in the fields. So when he saw her bent low among the barley, he turned to one of his workers and asked, who is she? The worker replied, that is the Moabite woman who came back with Naomi. She asked to glean among the sheaves and has worked all morning with only a little rest. Boaz walked gently to Ruth. She straightened, unsure of what to expect. He smiled, his voice as kind. Listen, my daughter, he said softly. Do not go to another field. Stay here with my servant girls. I've told the young man not to touch you. And when you're thirsty, help yourself to the water jars. Ruth bowed low to the ground, surprised. "Why have I found such favor in your eyes, when I am only a foreigner?" And Boaz said, "I've been told all that you've done for Naomi, how you left your people and your homeland to come to a place you didn't know. May the Lord repay you for your kindness. May you be richly rewarded by the God under whose wings you have come to rest." When Ruth's heart warmed, she returned to her work. He saw her humility. He heard her laughter with the other women. He watched how she shared her food with the hungry, how she knelt by Naomi in the evenings, how she never asked for more than what was given. And slowly, a seed began to grow in Boaz's heart. But Boaz was patient, and Ruth was content to wait. The days passed gently, barley became wheat, the seasons shifted like a lullaby in slow motion. And still, each morning, Ruth walked to the field with her basket, and Boaz watched her walk home again, his thoughts warm, his prayers quiet. There was no thunder in this love story, no whirlwind romance, just kindness and rest and God's hand, moving slowly, silently, steadily. And while the world went on spinning, Ruth's story was gently falling into place. Each step she took in that field was a step closer to something beautiful. But that is for another night. For now, close your eyes. Let Ruth's faithfulness comfort you. Let Boaz's kindness assure you. Let Naomi's joy begin to return to your own heart. And remember, God sees you too, even in the fields, even in the waiting, even in the quiet. Sleep now, gentle soul. The harvest was over. The air had changed, cooler now, touched by evening winds. The fields no longer danced with golden grain. The baskets were full. The work was done. And in Bethlehem the people celebrated. Boaz too prepared for the threshing, a time when the gathered barley was winnowed, the grain separated from the husks, and the harvest safely stored. It was a time of joy, a time of thanks, a time of rest after hard labor. But for Naomi, it was time for something more. She watched Ruth closely. She saw how Boaz looked at her. She noticed the way Ruth smiled when she spoke of him. She heard the gentle silence between them, so full of kindness, so full of waiting. And one evening, as the sky turned soft with twilight, Naomi spoke. "My daughter," she said, "should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" Ruth looked up, quietly listening. "Boaz is our kinsman. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Wash yourself, put on fresh clothes, anoint yourself with oil, then go to him. But do not make yourself known until he has eaten and lain down. And when he sleeps, go and uncover his feet and lie there. He will tell you what to do." Ruth said nothing for a moment. Then she bowed her head. "I will do all that you say." This was not a demand, not a trick, not a grasping for attention. It was a custom of kindness, a quiet way in those ancient days to ask for care, for covering, for marriage from one who could redeem. It was not forward, it was faithful. So Ruth prepared. She bathed. She dressed in clean garments. She wrapped herself in a shawl that smelled of cedar and olive oil. And then, when night had fully fallen, she walked quietly through the town. The moon was high. The stars above her glowed softly. Her heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with peace. She had walked through loss. She had walked behind harvesters. Now she walked towards something new. At the threshing floor, Boaz had finished his meal. He was content, full from the harvest. He found a place to lie down near the grain. He covered himself with a cloak and closed his eyes, listening to the wind. And Ruth stood at a distance, watching, waiting. Then, when all was still, she approached. She knelt beside him. She gently uncovered his feet, and she lay down, quiet as a prayer. Hours passed. Then Boaz stirred. He reached down and realized he was not alone. A soft voice answered him in the dark. "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over me, for you are a kinsman redeemer." Boaz sat up slowly. He looked at her, not with surprise, not with judgment, but with a heart moved by her faith. He spoke kindly. "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness of yours is greater than the first. You have not gone after younger men, whether rich or poor. Do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. Everyone knows you are a woman of noble character." Ruth said nothing more. There was nothing to prove, only trust. Boaz continued, "There is a closer relative than I. If he will redeem you, let him do so. But if not, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you." And then he said, "Stay here until morning." So Ruth rested at his feet, not in shame, not in worry, but in peace, under the stars, under the edge of his cloak, under the promise of a God who had led her every step of the way. Before the sun rose, Boaz rose gently. He did not wake the others. He gave Ruth grain to carry home, 6 measures of barley, enough to say, "You are not forgotten." And Ruth returned quietly to Naomi. The older woman opened the door, eyes full of quiet questions. Ruth set down the grain. She told her everything, and Naomi nodded with a knowing smile. "Wait, my daughter, for the man will not rest until he has settled this matter today." And Ruth waited, not anxiously, not fearfully, but patiently, because now the story was no longer in her hands. It was in Boaz's and in God's. Ruth has waited. Naomi has trusted. And now the next part of the story begins. Not with noise or haste, but with care, courage, and the unfolding of something long and deeply good. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breath fall into rhythm. This chapter is not meant to stir you awake, but to rock you gently into peace, like a cradle of kindness. The morning was pale and still. In Bethlehem, dew clung to the stones of the street. Birds fluttered along rooftops, and the town slowly stirred awake. Boaz, strong and steady, stepped out into the dawn. His face was calm. His pace was sure. There was something important to do. He walked to the city gate, a place where elders gathered, where business was done, where decisions were made among witnesses. He sat down at the edge of the gate, and there, waiting in stillness, he saw him, the closer Redeemer, the man who had the right, by custom, to redeem Naomi's land and marry Ruth before Boaz could. Boaz called gently to him, "Come, friend, sit here." And the man came, curious. Boaz then called 10 elders of the town, asking them to sit with them too. It was not a meeting of power or politics. It was a moment of quiet justice, of mercy wrapped in tradition. of God's story moving forward through conversation. Boaz began simply. Naomi has come back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. You are the first in line to redeem it. If you will do so, do it now in the presence of these elders. But if not, I will. The man nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I will redeem it. But Boaz continued, gently. On the day you acquire the land, you must also marry Ruth, the Moabite widow, to carry on the name of the dead. And the man paused. Something shifted in his eyes. He looked down. Then he said softly, Then I cannot redeem it, lest I endanger my own inheritance. You may redeem it instead. Boaz bowed his head respectfully, and in front of all, the man removed his sandal, a quiet symbol of surrender and release. He handed it to Boaz. And in that small, simple act, Ruth's story changed forever. Boaz stood. His voice was kind, steady, warm like the early sun. You are all witnesses this day. I have bought from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and I have taken Ruth the Moabite to be my wife. She will carry on the name of the family. May her house be like the house of Perez, full of life and blessing. The elders and the townspeople smiled. They nodded in agreement, and one by one, they blessed the moment. That evening, Boaz returned home. Ruth opened the door. Their eyes met, gentle, joyful, full of peace. No loud words, just understanding. And Ruth's waiting was over. In time, Ruth became Boaz's wife. Their love grew like barley in spring, soft, steady, rooted. And in that quiet house, something even greater began. Ruth conceived, and she bore a son. Naomi, who once called herself Mara, bitter, held that baby in her arms. She kissed his cheeks. She rocked him by firelight. And the women of the town came and said, Praise be to the Lord. Naomi has a redeemer. May this child be famous in Israel. And they named him Obed. Obed would become the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David, the shepherd, the poet, the king. And generations later, through David's line, would come Jesus. But Ruth did not know that yet. She only knew that her arms were full, her home was safe, her life was home. The God she had followed to a foreign land had never left her. And now, through her gentleness, her courage, her kindness, the world had been blessed. And so her story ends. Not with noise, not with a throne, but with a cradle, with Naomi's laughter, with Boaz's quiet joy, with a child asleep in a grandmother's arms. And now, dear one, may your heart rest like Ruth's. May your soul trust like Naomi's. May your spirit find peace like Boaz in the fields. You are not forgotten. You are not alone.
Ruth did not begin her story in peace. She began it in loss. She was born in a land far from Bethlehem, far from God's people, far from the stories of Abraham and Moses. Her world was shaped by different gods, different customs, different expectations. But Ruth was different. Even before she ever met Naomi, even before the famine, even before the grief, there was something soft and steady in her soul. A strength made of gentleness, a heart that leaned into loyalty. When her husband died, the world gave her choices. She could go home, she could start over, she could forget the woman who had become her second mother, and no one would have blamed her. But Ruth chose the harder path. Not for attention, not for reward, but for love. She clung to Naomi, not just out of grief, but out of hope. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. With those words, Ruth began to overcome, not by fighting, not by shouting, but by staying. She walked miles on tired feet. She slept on unfamiliar soil. She listened to whispers in a town where she was a stranger. And she rose early. Every morning she rose before the sun, before the town, before the fields were full, and she walked to the edge of someone else's land to gather scraps. Scraps of grain, scraps of safety, scraps of hope. But you see, Ruth never saw her work as small. She never said, "Why me?" She never said, "I'm too tired." She never said, "I deserve more." She simply moved, quietly, and the field in return gave back, bit by bit. God was watching. Ruth overcame her grief not by forgetting it, but by carrying it gently. She didn't let bitterness root in her heart. She didn't let fear rule her steps. She let love speak louder than loss. She saw Naomi not as a burden, but as a blessing to honor. And she believed, softly, bravely, that the God of Naomi could become her God too. And he did. He met her in a field. He met her through Boaz's kindness, through warm bread, through soft words, through barley dropped on purpose, through favor she never asked for. She didn't force the outcome. She didn't chase the blessing. She simply remained faithful. And in the right time, it came. Boaz didn't fall in love with Ruth because of beauty or boldness. He loved her because she was good, because she stayed when others left, because she honored her promises, because she lived with such gentleness that it softened even the hardest corners of grief. He saw what God saw, a woman of worth, a woman who overcame not with might, but with meekness, which is stronger still. When she lay at Boaz's feet on the threshing floor, she was not desperate. She was faithful. She knew her place in the story wasn't to demand, but to trust. She placed her future not in hands of men, but in the hands of the one who had guided her across countries, through famine, through sorrow. And her reward was not just comfort, it was legacy. Ruth became a mother, and a grandmother, and a great-great-grandmother to kings. Through her line came David. Through David came Christ. Through her gentleness came redemption itself. Ruth overcame because she never let her sorrow harden her spirit. She loved deeply. She worked humbly. She trusted bravely. And she walked quietly into one of the greatest honors in all of Scripture. So tonight, if you feel forgotten, remember Ruth. If you feel small, remember Ruth. If you feel like your kindness goes unnoticed, your loyalty unreturned, your quiet efforts unseen, remember Ruth, because the God who watched her in the field, who listened when no one else did, who arranged every stalk of barley to fall just right, that same God sees you. And just like Ruth, you don't need to fix everything. You don't need to know where the story ends. You only need to stay close. Stay close to love, to truth, to faith, to hope, and He will write your story too. Now sleep, beloved listener. Sleep in the same peace Ruth found, in soft fields, in quiet love, in the slow blooming of a life blessed not by loudness, but by kindness. Ruth's life was not one of comfort or ease. From the beginning, her days were marked by choices that carried quiet weight. She was born in Moab, a place far from the worship of the one true God. Raised among a people who lived their lives apart from Israel's promise. Yet, even in that place, something in Ruth's spirit was different. Soft, loyal, open. She married a man from Judah, a son of Naomi, who had come to Moab with his family, seeking food during a famine. The marriage was a time of hope, of companionship, but that hope was short-lived. Soon, Ruth's husband died. Her brother-in-law died. Her father-in-law died. What was left was sorrow and 3 women alone in a world that gave little help to widows. Naomi, broken-hearted, decided to return to Bethlehem, the place of her people. She told her daughters-in-law to stay behind, to return to their families, to find new husbands, to start new lives. Orpah wept and returned home. But Ruth stood still. She looked into Naomi's tired eyes, saw the lines of grief and the silence of loss, and she said something that would echo through generations. Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't made from a place of certainty or advantage. It was a vow spoken in the face of unknowns, a vow that came not from logic, but from love. That single moment defined Ruth's life, not just because of what she said. In Bethlehem they had very little. 2 women returning empty. But Ruth did not sit idle. She rose early each morning and walked to the fields to glean. It was a law in Israel that the poor and foreigners were allowed to gather what the harvesters left behind. Ruth picked up barley stalks, one by one, hunched in the heat, moving steadily, quietly, respectfully. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for more than what she was given. She did what she could. And even in that humble work, God was weaving something greater. The field she entered just happened to belong to Boaz, a kind and godly man who had heard of her loyalty to Naomi. Boaz was moved, not by what she asked for, but by what she had already done. "May the Lord reward you," he said, "for what you have done for your mother-in-law. May you be richly blessed under the wings of the God of Israel." Ruth thanked him quietly and kept working. That evening, she returned home not just with grain, but with grace. Naomi saw it and recognized the kindness of the Lord. "That man is our relative," she said. "He is one of our redeemers." Time passed, and Ruth continued gleaning. Day after day she returned to the fields. Her hands became strong. Her heart remained tender. She never hurried the story. She never tried to take matters into her own hands. She waited. She served. She stayed. And in the stillness of her waiting, something beautiful grew. Eventually, Naomi told Ruth it was time to ask Boaz to fulfill the role of redeemer. This wasn't a demand for romance, but a request for restoration, for protection, for legacy, for covering. Ruth prepared quietly. She washed, she dressed, she went to the threshing floor at night, lay at Boaz's feet, and said softly, "Spread your garment over me." She didn't say it to seduce. She said it with humility, with respect, with trust.
Boaz was a man of integrity. He didn't take advantage of the moment. He spoke with gentleness and promised to do what was right. There was another man closer in line to redeem, and Boaz said he would speak to him in the morning. And Ruth went home, not with fear, but with peace. The next day, Boaz gathered the elders at the gate. He offered the opportunity to the other relative, who declined. And so Boaz stepped in, honoring Ruth, honoring the law, honoring God. He took her as his wife, and from their union came a child, Obed. Obed would be the father of Jesse. Jesse would be the father of David. David, the king whose line would one day bring forth the Savior of the world. Ruth, the Moabite, the widow, the foreigner, became the great-grandmother of a king and part of the ancestry of Christ himself. She didn't plan it. She didn't chase it. She simply walked forward one faithful step at a time. Ruth overcame sorrow, not by fighting, but by loving. She overcame poverty not by rising in status, but by bending low in service. She overcame uncertainty, not by controlling the outcome, but by placing her trust in the God she chose to follow. Her faithfulness wasn't a moment, it was a way of life.
It was in how she listened, how she served, how she stayed, how she worked, how she trusted, even when it hurt, even when it was slow, even when the next step was hidden. She was faithful when she left her homeland. She was faithful when she labored in the fields. She was faithful when she lay down at the threshing floor. She was faithful when she became a mother. And because of that faithfulness, God lifted her life into his greater story. You don't need to be a hero to matter. You don't need to be known to be seen. You don't need to be powerful to be part of something eternal. You only need to stay when staying is hard, to give when no one notices, to trust when you don't yet understand the why. That's what Ruth did. And maybe that's what you're doing too. Maybe the quiet love you've offered is doing more than you think. Maybe your small, unnoticed loyalty is being written into a story much bigger than you know. You don't have to force it. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to keep walking, keep gathering, keep showing up with your whole heart, like Ruth. And if tonight you feel unseen or tired or unsure of what's next, may you hear the quiet truth. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are deeply loved by the same God who watched over Ruth. He sees your steps, he sees your faith, and he is not finished with your story. Now rest. Let Ruth's steady strength become your own. Let her courage wrap around your heart like a soft blanket. Let her quiet spirit guide you into sleep, because sometimes the most beautiful faith isn't the loud kind. It's the kind that stays. Good night, gentle soul. Sleep in peace.